So I want to talk about a lawsuit that Democrats have filed against Donald Trump, seeking to block an executive order that he issued last week having to do with the way elections are run in this country. Or better put, an executive order with which he seeks to dictate how elections are run in this country. Now, the reason I want to talk about the lawsuit, because I've already discussed the executive order, but the reason I want to talk about this lawsuit is because there's good and bad when it comes to Democrats challenging this with a lawsuit. And that's what I want to talk about. But before I do, let me read just a little bit of an article here about the lawsuit. This is from Reuters. The Democratic Party on Monday asked a U.S. court to block Republican President Donald Trump's executive order overhauling the election system, arguing the changes risk denying eligible U.S. citizens the right to vote. In a lawsuit against the Trump administration filed in a D.C. federal court, the Democratic National Committee said Trump exceeded his authority in the March 25th order by requiring voters to prove they are U.S. citizens, preventing states from counting mail-in ballots received after Election Day, and threatening to take away federal funding from states that do not comply. Okay, so that's what Trump is trying to dictate by executive order. Now, the reason why, let's begin with the bad, because I don't like that this lawsuit has been filed. Now, I think it's a practical necessity that it has been filed, but the fact that it's being filed, I think, is evidence of how out of whack this constitutional republic is. Because if this were a healthy constitutional republic, if we were actually following the Constitution, if people in this country, and I'm including state governors and secretaries of state, if they actually understood how this Constitution is supposed to operate, they wouldn't file this lawsuit. And the reason I say that is because this is an executive order in which Donald Trump seeks to change the way elections are run by imposing certain conditions that states must do this because I say so. They must verify citizenship because I say so. They must throw out mail-in ballots that are received after Election Day because I say so. And on and on. Please ignore my little puffball over there. This should just be ignored. That's the way this executive order should be handled. Because a president has no authority whatsoever to do any of this by executive order. And because he does not, this executive order is meaningless. It's worthless. It has no force of law. Presidents have no authority to change law. And that's what he's trying to do here. He is trying to change election law. He has no authority to do that. He is usurping illegally, unconstitutionally, violating the separation of powers. He is trying to usurp the power of Congress. Only Congress can make law. So because he is trying to make law, to change law by executive order, it's a meaningless executive order. It has no force of law. So if this were a healthy republic, the way to deal with this is simply to ignore it because it's meaningless, right? The problem is this is not a healthy republic. And even governors and secretaries of state, even those who oppose Donald Trump and oppose this executive order, many of them will treat it as if they have to follow it because the president said so. No, just because the president tells you to do something doesn't mean you have to do it until a court saves you and tells you, no, you don't have to. Donald Trump has no more authority to tell states how to run elections than he has to tell me to repaint this wall, which I'm going to do, but he doesn't have any right to tell me that. If he told me, if he issued an executive order saying that I have to repaint this wall, I don't have to repaint the wall. He can go F himself, right? Because he has no authority to tell me to repaint my wall. He has no authority to tell the states how to conduct elections either. So why would the states do what he says just because he told them to? So if this were a healthy republic, where all the players in the system understood the Constitution and understood what the president has authority to do and what he doesn't, then they would just laugh at this. They'd say, okay, nice executive order. We're not doing that. Unless they choose to. Unless states want to change their own laws to do these things. Then they're free to do that. But they don't have to do any of this just because he tells them to. Just because he puts it in an executive order. I mean, he might as well just put this out in a tweet. Would they obey a tweet? I mean, a tweet doesn't have any force of law. Would they obey him if he puts something in a tweet? No. Well, why would you do it? Why would you obey him if he puts it on a piece of paper with his signature that says executive order at the top? That has no more authority than a tweet. So that's what should happen. And then let Donald Trump sue. Okay? Let him say, well, the states aren't doing what I say. I'm going to file a lawsuit. Let him go to court. Let him file a lawsuit to try to get a ruling from a court to enforce his executive order. And let the courts laugh at him. What do you mean? We're not going to make them do what you say because you said so in an executive order that you have no authority to issue. Get the hell out of here. That's how all of this should work. But unfortunately, even people who should know better, like governors and secretaries of state, I fear that they would go along with this until a court tells them that they don't have to. And you know that red state governors and secretaries of state would be more than happy to do whatever the hell Donald Trump tells them to, even if it's in violation of their own state law. They would say, well, doesn't matter what our state law says, Donald Trump issued an executive order, so we're going to do that. We're going to ignore our own state laws and do what he says by an illegal executive order. We know that they would do that. And because of that, and because of I know damn well a lot of blue state governors and secretaries of state and other election officials would probably go along with this too. Because no one seems to understand in this country, or very few people seem to understand in this country, even elected officials, how the Constitution works. And so they get an executive order. Oh, I guess we got to follow the executive order. No, you don't. If you're a state governor or secretary of state or whoever's in charge of elections in any given state, you don't take orders from the president. He's not your boss. He's the president of the federal government. He has no authority to dictate what you do in the states. So that's how it should work. But we know that's a problem. People will do this. People will follow his executive order, even though they shouldn't. And so because of that, practically speaking, they had to file this lawsuit. And so I hate that they have to do this, but it's good that they did. And really, this should be a slam dunk. Of course, we are in the era of Donald Trump with a corrupted Supreme Court giving him immunity, ignoring Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to allow an insurrectionist to become president. So we have a very corrupted Supreme Court. That said, however, it is not completely corrupted. Donald Trump is going to lose a lot of cases. And he's already losing a lot of cases. And he's already been dealt defeats by this Supreme Court. So I reject the idea, as many people seem to have, that this Supreme Court is going to do whatever the hell Donald Trump wants them to do. It's just not true, and there's no evidence of it. They have issued some horrible decisions to protect him. There's no doubt about it. But there's no evidence that they will do whatever he wants. I mean, even take that horrible immunity decision. Even with that decision, that decision would not have protected him from being prosecuted and sent to prison. It did not give him blanket immunity. And had he not been reelected by the American people, he would be still on trial for that case. And he almost certainly would have been convicted and sentenced to prison. The Supreme Court could have just given him blanket immunity and dismissed the indictment against him completely. They didn't do that. They did not protect him from prison with their ruling. They helped him with their ruling, and it was a horrible ruling. They helped him most of all by delaying the case so that the case couldn't proceed to trial before the election. That's how they helped him. Ultimately, it was the American people that saved him from prison, not the Supreme Court. So anyway, the point is, even this Supreme Court is not going to uphold this executive order. There's no way. He has no authority. This is a substantive change of law, and he has no authority whatsoever to do it. They are not going to this brazenly violate the separation of powers and completely throw out constitutional government, because that's what they would essentially be doing. They would be saying that, oh yeah, presidents can write law now. Congress is obsolete. That's what they would be saying if they upheld this executive order. And as bad as the Supreme Court is, and you will not find me defending them, I do not see John Roberts going along with this. I do not see Amy Coney Barrett going along with this. And I do not see Brett Kavanaugh going along with this, or Neil Gorsuch. Honestly, I don't see any of them going along with it, but if anyone were going to, it would be the two most corrupt, and that's Alito and Thomas. I don't see any of the others going along with this. So anyways, at least I sure as hell hope they don't. Anyway, that's what I wanted to point out here. It's good that they filed this lawsuit, but it shows how screwed up things are in this country that they even have to. They shouldn't. Everyone in the country should ignore this executive order and let Donald Trump go to court to try to force the states to follow his executive order, and then he would get laughed out of court. That's how it should work. And that's exactly what should happen. But that's not the world we live in. That's not, this is not a healthy constitutional republic. After all, we have a convicted felon insurrectionist in the White House.